our previous video, we gave like an introduction to the invisible world, to does it mean that faith opens our eyes to a world that is beyond this world. And that is the key aspect of what Newman calls the sacramental principle. In this video, we're going to delve into the implications of the existence of this other world and how they relate to each other. So the implications of the sacramental principle. What difference does it make? But first of all, you might be wondering, what is a principle in this sense that Newman explains? Well, a principle is a simple and general truth that allows us to explain other truths that arise from it. So a truth that gives rise to other truths that are more specific. And what is the sacramental principle particularly? In Newman's own words, it means that the visible world is the instrument, yet the veil of the world invisible. The veil, yet still partially the symbol and index, so that all that exists or happens visibly conceals and yet suggests, and above all subserves, a system of persons, facts, and events beyond itself. So the created world and the visible history of the world are sort of revelatory instruments. They are sacraments, that's where the word comes from, of the invisible world and of God's plans. So through what we can see and through the events that we see in history, we are allowed some sort of access to what we cannot see. Understanding history gives us access to understanding God's providence, for example. The word sacrament, in its original sense, means mystery. It's the same word actually in Latin and Greek. And it means a reality that is both visible and invisible. The sacramental principle involves looking not just at things, but looking through things. This is what Newman is trying to convey. And this principle is fulfilled and realized to its fullest sense in the mystery of the Incarnation. When the world became flesh, when the Word became flesh, because it means the ultimate union of the invisible with the visible. Newman says, once and only once for 33 years has he condescended to become one of the beings which are seen, when he, the second person of the ever-blessed Trinity, was by an unspeakable mercy born of the Virgin Mary into this sensible world. And then he was seen, heard, handled. He ate, he drank, he slept, he conversed, he went about, he acted as other men. So the union of the visible and the invisible. And the sacramental principle means how those two relate to each other. In 1841, Newman published an essay entitled Milman's View of Christianity, which gives us a lot of insight into this sacramental principle. Milman was an Anglican historian and priest who a year earlier had published a 3-volume history of Christianity, and it became a very popular work. It was very well received for its erudition and for its style. And in his essay, Newman acknowledges and praises all these good aspects of the work, but he also makes a more subtle analysis of the spirit that Milman conveys about Christianity. And he realizes that it might not be the spirit that faith gives us. It's a spirit that actually devoids faith of the reality of the invisible world. Newman starts with this statement. He says, "It is obvious that the whole system of revelation may be viewed in various, nay, antagonist aspects." So we can understand revelation in many different things, and maybe we can even use the same words or have the same Bible, but understand it in a very different way. And he said that Milman's view of Christianity was actually one that lacked the sacramental principle, that lacked the reality of the invisible world. That is the spirit of his view of Christianity. And that same spirit of, or way of looking at Christianity became stronger, especially in the 20th century, and still exists today. There was a German theologian, Boltmann, and he spoke about demythologizing Christianity. So he assumed that Christianity was sort of covered in myths that were actually not true, and we had to get rid of those. So this is a quote from Boltmann. He says, "The New Testament image of the world is a mythical image of the world. The earth is not simply the scene of the natural occurrence of day to day, of foresight and work that have order and regularity. Rather, it is also a theater for the work of supernatural powers, God and his angels, Satan and his demons. All this is mythological language. It's unbelievable for men and women today. We can't use electric lights and radios and at the same time believe in the wonderful world of the New Testament." And sometimes this same spirit has reached us and it is conveyed to us. So it makes Christianity an important moral system. So it's about learning how to be better persons. But the reality behind that moral system, the worldview, it is a completely different one. Bultmann's view of Christianity and the Gospel's view of the world. There was a joke in seminary, when faced with all these Bible scholars that try to demythologize scripture, so get rid of all what they call myths, mythological language, which is actually the reality of the invisible world. And they said that when the angel appeared to Mary, the angel Gabriel, he said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary, for I am just a literary genre." So the sacramental principle serves Newman to explain what is the confusion, what is the difference between these two visions of the Christian revelation. He says, Christianity has an external aspect and an internal. It is human without, divine within. The Christian history is an outward visible sign of an inward spiritual grace. Whether the sign can be satisfactorily treated separate from the thing signified is another matter. But it seems to be Mr. Milman's intention so to treat it. So he accuses Milman of only retaining the external aspects, the visible aspects of the history of Christianity and of Christianity itself, and getting rid of the truly essential aspects, which are the invisible, the signified aspects, which is God's providence, God's power working through history, at work in the history of the church. And that, he says, is to divorce the sign from the signified. Stay with the outward symbols and facts, but don't see where they are pointing. What is that they suggest? There is a saying that goes like this. It says, when the wise man points to the star, the fool looks at the finger. This is what Newman sees happening to Milman, or at least what it looks like. He sticks to the external facts of the history of Christianity as if there was nothing else, nothing supernatural, no divine element. And Newman says this is a great danger because it actually destroys Christianity from within. He says in another essay, to rationalize in matters of revelation is to make our reason the standard and measure of the doctrines revealed, to stipulate that those doctrines should be such as to carry with them their own justification, to reject them if they come in collision with our existing opinions or habits of thought, or are with difficulty harmonized with our existing stock of knowledge. So it is putting our reason, our capacities, above revelation, above the power of God, and so making our minds God, and not being able to receive the truth from God. So the sacramental principle is a clear expression of something that is in the essence of Christianity and that protects the reality of the faith. And that if we lose it, it begins to blur the faith. But in addition to saving us from rationalism, the sacramental principle is opposed to two extreme positions. In the first place, it is an anti-materialistic principle. It tells us that the supernatural world is something different but more real than this world that we see, the world of matter. Spirituality cannot be reduced to elements, to forces or energies of this world, which can be measured and verified by science, because science only treats with this world, with the visible world. It has no access to the invisible. So we should not try to put a microscope into angels, try to see what is actually invisible, because matter is not the only thing that exists. There is another level, another category that totally escapes the world of physics. This invisible world is neither metaphorical nor mythological. It is not a way of explaining profound truths. It is true. It is not something that is beneath the cultured and scientific intelligences. It is something that is above anything in this world. Just as any man's political views are above his dog's intelligence. It is something that is beyond our capacity, and that doesn't make it less real, but actually more real. And we shouldn't expect our capacity to be the measure of existence, of being. We are just one part of the created world, and we are not God, and our intelligence is not omnipotent. So this invisible world is much more real than this world, as if we were to say that in heaven the water is wetter and fire is hotter. The only way we can know what that world is like is through the initiative of that world to ourselves. So the invisible world has to take the first step, has to be revealed to us, it has to be communicated to us, because if not, we would have no access to it. And that's why we can know a lot about the invisible world, because God has told us about it. Even though our senses and our capacities and our intelligence has no access to it, through revelation we have a lot of knowledge about it. There's a book of C.S. Lewis called The Screwtape Letters. It speaks about this devil that trains his nephew on how to tempt a human being and try to lead him to damnation. But towards the end of the book, spoiler alert, the human being actually is saved. He dies and he goes to heaven. So at the end, this demon trainer is rebuking his nephew for having failed in his mission. And he describes what it was for this human soul when it was separated from its body to become aware of the reality of the invisible world. And it is a magnificent description. This happens when this man gets hit by a bomb and then he dies. And this is how this devil speaks out the entrance of this soul to heaven. It says, "He got through so easily. No gradual misgivings, no doctor's sentence, no nursing home, no operating theater, no false hopes of life. Sheer instantaneous liberation. One moment it seemed to be all our world. The scream of bombs, the fall of houses, the stink and taste of high explosives on the lips and in the lungs, the feet burning with weariness, the heart cold with horrors, the brain reeling, the legs aching. Next moment, all this was gone, gone like a bad dream, never again to be of any account. Defeated, outmaneuvered fool. Did you mark how naturally, as if he'd been born for it, the earth-born vermin entered the new life? How all his doubts became, in the twinkling of an eye, ridiculous? As he saw you, he also saw them. I know how it was. You reeled back dizzy and blinded, more hurt by them than he had ever been by bombs. The degradation of it, that this thing of earth and slime could stand upright and converse with spirits before whom you, as spirit, could only cower. Perhaps you had hoped that the awe and strangeness of it would dash his joy, but that is the cursed thing. The gods are strange to mortal eyes, and yet they are not strange. He had no faintest conception till that very hour of how they would look, and even doubted their existence. But when he saw them, he knew that he had always known them and realized what part each one of them had played at many an hour in his life when he had supposed himself alone. So that now he could say to them one by one, not "Who are you?" but "So it was you all the time." He saw not only them, he saw him, speaking about God. This animal, this thing begotten in a bed, could look on him. What is blinding, suffocating fire to you is now cool light to him, is clarity itself, and wears the form of a man. Such a description of the awareness that his soul had of the existence of angels and of his guardian angel and of the presence of God. On the other hand, the sacramental principle is also an anti-spiritualistic principle. It implies recognizing that matter is not something bad. There's this position, like excessive spiritualism, that despises matter and says that matter has no purpose. But the sacramental principle tells us that the visible and corporeal world is not a bad thing, but a good thing, because this principle affirms that matter is a channel chosen by God for us to connect with the invisible. Through visible things, God manifests himself. Through this reality which is inferior, much higher realities are expressed. And this dignifies matter, dignifies the body, nature, symbols, what can be touched, faces, elements. Everything can be a channel to connect the eternal and transcendent realities with us. In other words, there is no absolute separation between spirit and matter. They are connected. The material is a manifestation, a veil, and yet an instrument of relationship with the spiritual world, and therefore with God. And this is especially true in the Catholic liturgy. The liturgy means just this, that through sensible, visible signs, we understand and we touch with our five senses what is actually invisible, what it cannot really be touched. We enter into contact with God, with heaven, with the saints, with the angels, through visible signs. Paul Claudel, this famous French poet, he had a strong experience of conversion through the liturgy, and especially when he heard the bells of the Cathedral of Paris, of Notre Dame, and he entered, and this is what he says. He says, "I attended Vespers at Notre Dame, and listening to the Magnificat, I had the revelation of a God who stretched out his arms to me." And then he says, "The liturgy and assiduity in the ceremonies of the Church teach much more than books. We must immerse ourselves in this immense flow of glory, certainty, and poetry." These are the implications of the sacramental principle, and this becomes especially concrete and true and specific in the mystery of the Eucharist. We're going to speak more about how to apply this principle in our next video.